What happens when one of Hollywood's most adored actors walks into what he thinks is a normal interview, only to find himself caught in a verbal trap that would make his Twilight co-stars squirm? What you're about to see is the moment Robert Pattinson's famous calm finally broke on live television. And honestly, you've never witnessed anything quite like this before. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment below because this story gets crazier with every word exchange between these two. The atmosphere in the studio that morning felt unusual. There was a tense energy in the air that even the experienced crew couldn't ignore. Robert Pattinson sat in the guest chair, keeping his usual calm as he adjusted his jacket. He had come ready to talk about his latest movie, a psychological thriller that was getting serious Oscar buzz. What he hadn't prepared for was Joy Behar's approach. "So, Robert," Joy started, her voice carrying that familiar hint that meant trouble. "I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me for weeks." Robert tilted his head slightly, keeping his polite smile. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Joy leaned forward with the sharp focus of someone who had cornered their target. "I've been reading about your new film, and I'm worried about the message it might send to young people, especially young women who still see you as that vampire heartthrob." The co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't part of the planned discussion. Whoopi Goldberg shifted in her seat, sensing where this was going. "I'm sorry. What message are you talking about exactly?" Robert asked, his British accent showing a trace of confusion mixed with patience. Joy's eyes sparkled with the thrill of dropping a bomb. "The message that it's okay for men to manipulate and gaslight women, which seems exactly what your character does throughout the film. And honestly, considering your past as a controlling vampire boyfriend, I find it disturbing that you keep choosing these kinds of roles." The studio went quiet except for the faint hum of the cameras. Robert's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed steady. "Joy, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Have you actually watched the film?" "I've seen enough," Joy snapped, waving her hand. "I've read reviews. I've talked to people who've seen it. And frankly, I don't need to watch 2 hours of a woman being psychologically tortured to know it's not something to celebrate." "But that's exactly the point of the movie," Robert said, his voice sharper now. "It's meant to show those behaviors, not celebrate them. My character is clearly the villain. The story is about showing how harmful manipulation can be." Joy scoffed loudly. "Oh, please, Robert. You can dress it up with all the fancy film school talk you want, but at the end of the day, you're still making money from exploiting women's trauma. And the fact that you don't see that is part of the problem." The camera caught the subtle change in Robert's expression. His polite mask didn't fall, but there was a new intensity in his eyes. "Joy, I respect your right to have opinions about films you haven't watched, but I think it's really irresponsible to make sweeping judgments based on secondhand information." "Irresponsible?" Joy's voice climbed an octave as she leaned back, feigning shock. "I'll tell you what's irresponsible, Robert. A grown man who became famous playing a stalker vampire, now taking roles where he psychologically torments women for entertainment, pretending that's art when it's just the same misogynistic nonsense dressed up in indie film style." The other co-hosts looked like they wanted to disappear. Sarah Haynes started to speak, but Robert was already replying, calm but with steel beneath it. "That's an interesting point, Joy. Especially from someone whose career has been built on tearing down others on national TV. If we're talking about exploiting controversy, maybe your career is worth looking at." The studio gasped. Joy's mouth fell open but Robert continued. "You know what I really find irresponsible? A talk show host ambushing a guest with personal attacks disguised as social commentary. You invited me here to talk about my work, but you clearly didn't intend to have a real conversation. You just wanted to create a highlight moment for yourself." Joy recovered quickly, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy for asking tough questions. This is exactly what I mean, Robert. The minute someone challenges you, you play the victim, classic manipulation, and it proves my point perfectly." "Your point?" Robert laughed, but without humor. "Your point seems to be that you can say anything about someone's work without doing basic research, and then when they defend themselves, you call them manipulative. That's not journalism, Joy. That's bullying with better lighting." The tension was so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. Every camera focused on the two, capturing each glance and word. The other co-host sat frozen, unsure whether to step in. Joy's face was red now, her voice louder. "Bullying? You want to talk about bullying? You've made millions playing characters who intimidate and control women, and now you're trying to intimidate me for calling it out. The only difference is I'm not a helpless character in your movie. I won't be silenced by your charm or your victim act." Robert's patience was stretched thin. "Joy, for the past 10 minutes, you've attacked my character, my career choices, and my integrity based on a film you admit you haven't even watched. You've accused me of promoting violence, being manipulative, and exploiting trauma. And when I correct you, you say I'm playing the victim. Do you see the irony?" "All I see," Joy shot back, as a privileged actor upset that someone finally called him out. "You can sit in your fancy suit and use big words, but you're just another Hollywood pretty boy who thinks he's above criticism." That cut deep. Robert's hands slowly clenched into fists. His jaw worked silently, and when he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. Above criticism, he repeated, each word precise. Joy, I've spent 15 minutes answering your attacks with facts. I've tried to engage in good faith, even though it was obvious from the start that you didn't want a real discussion. So tell me, how am I acting above criticism? Joy waved her hand dismissively, feeling confident. Oh, spare me the wounded artist act. Robert, you act like I'm attacking you personally when I'm just pointing out the consequences of your career choices. You can't hide behind artistic integrity when people call you out for glorifying toxic masculinity. Robert's voice finally rose, making everyone sit up. Joy, did you listen to a single word I said? The film clearly condemns the behavior you accuse me of promoting. My character is the villain, he is punished. The story is about a woman finding strength to escape his manipulation. But you wouldn't know that because you chose to base your opinion on gossip and headlines rather than actually engaging with the material. Work, you're so quick to criticize. I don't need to watch propaganda to understand what it is. Joy fired back, her voice growing sharper with each word. Honestly, I'm tired of men like you telling women what we should or shouldn't be upset about. You don't get to decide if your work harms women. We do. Men like me. Robert's voice turned icy, and the tension in his eyes was obvious. What exactly does that mean, Joy? What kind of man am I in your expert opinion? Joy leaned in, sensing an opening. You're the kind of man who thinks he can talk his way out of responsibility. The kind who becomes defensive and angry the second a woman challenges him. You're the kind who profits from stories of women being hurt and then acts shocked when women object. The silence after that was heavy. Robert stared at her for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but powerful. You want to know what kind of man I am, Joy? I'm the man who spent 6 months working with domestic violence counselors to make sure my performance was accurate and respectful. I'm the man who made sure part of the film's profits went to organizations helping abuse survivors. I'm the man who used his platform to speak out against the behaviors you're accusing me of promoting. But you wouldn't know any of that because you're too busy building straw men to tear down on national TV. Joy's face flamed red, but she pushed on. Oh, how convenient. Now you're suddenly a champion for women's rights. Where was all this activism when you were playing Edward Cullen, teaching teenage girls that stalking was romantic? That was it. Robert stood up so fast his chair fell back and the studio collectively gasped. His hands shook with restrained fury as he leaned forward, his voice slicing through the air. How dare you? The words came out as a growl. Every person in the studio felt the anger radiating from him. How dare you reduce my whole career to some twisted story you made up in your head? I was 19 when I was cast in Twilight, a teenager taking the biggest role of my life. Since then, I've spent 15 years using whatever influence that role gave me to do meaningful work. I've chosen projects to challenge harmful stereotypes and tell important stories. But none of that fits your story, does it, Joy? Joy tried to interrupt, but Robert's voice rose over hers, his accent sharper as his anger grew. No, you don't get to speak now, you've talked for 20 minutes. It's my turn. The other co-host froze, unable to look away from the verbal chaos. You want to lecture me about accountability? Let's talk about accountability, Joy. You've built a career out of creating outrage and tearing people down for fun. You've made money from controversies that didn't exist. Now you sit here trying to destroy someone's reputation based on ignorance and assumptions. I'm not trying to destroy anyone, Joy protested, but her voice lacked confidence. Really? Robert's laugh was bitter. Then what is this? You ambushed me with false claims, attacked my character, ignored my explanations, and accused me of being manipulative when I defended myself. If that isn't character assassination, what is? Joy's face went pale, but she stayed firm. It's called holding celebrities responsible. You're not a victim here, Robert. Accountable for what? Robert's voice rose, capturing every camera. For making a film you refuse to watch, for taking roles that challenge audiences, for trying to use my platform responsibly. What exactly am I accountable for, Joy, besides being successful enough to catch your attention? You're accountable for spreading harmful stories about women, Joy said, though her voice sounded weaker. Robert slammed his hand on the table, the sharp crack echoing. What stories, Joy? You keep saying I spread harmful narratives, but you can't name one because you didn't do your homework. You're just repeating words hoping they stick. The cameras focused on both faces, Joy uncomfortable, Robert barely containing his rage. The other co-hosts looked like they were watching a slow-motion crash. I don't have to explain my concerns to you, Joy said defensively. No, you don't. But you do have a responsibility to your audience to base concerns on facts, not fiction. You owe it to the people whose careers you attack to at least understand what you're attacking. You owe it to yourself to be better than this petty, vindictive performance. Joy's mouth opened and closed, struggling to respond. But Robert continued. You know the real tragedy, Joy. You had a chance today to talk about representation in media, about artists' responsibilities, about the complex link between entertainment and social issues. Instead, you turned it into a circus to humiliate me and make clips for social media. Joy croaked. I was trying to have that conversation. You got defensive and started attacking me personally. Robert's eyes narrowed. I got defensive. Joy, you started this segment by accusing me of promoting violence against women. You called my work misogynistic trash. You said my career makes me complicit in harming women. You questioned my morals, integrity, and motives, all while admitting you hadn't even watched the work. When I explained my film, you dismissed me as manipulative. If that's constructive conversation, our definitions of dialogue differ. Whoopi Goldberg finally spoke. Maybe we should take a breath here. No, Robert cut her off, never looking away from Joy. We're not taking a breath. We're finishing this because Joy has more to say. Don't you, Joy? You've been building up to something. You didn't bring me here to talk about my film. You brought me here to make a point. So, make it. Joy's face showed anger and embarrassment. Fine, you want my point, here it is. You've spent your career playing men who hurt women and now call it art. You've made millions off the fantasy of male dominance and female submission. When someone points it out, you throw a tantrum. The studio was silent. Robert stayed calm, his face unreadable. There it is. When the facts don't fit your story, you attack the person. When someone won't be bullied, you call them a spoiled child. You're right about one thing. I've made millions, and I've used it to support causes, help people, and make films that make audiences think. What have you done with your platform besides tear people down? Joy went white. How dare you question my work for women's rights? I've fought longer than you've been alive. Robert's voice was like a scalpel. From where I sit, it looks like you've been fighting for your relevance by attacking anyone who overshadows you. You built a career on outrage and controversy. When it runs out, you invent more. That's not true, Joy stammered, lacking conviction. Isn't it? Robert pressed on. Tell me, Joy, when did you last use this platform to help someone instead of tearing them down? When did you last celebrate a guest's work instead of ambushing them? When did you last build something positive instead of destroying someone who challenges your story? Joy opened her mouth, no words came. The co-hosts watched in horror as she struggled to defend herself. Robert leaned forward, voice low but clear. You want to talk toxic behavior, Joy? Look in the mirror. You want to talk about hurting others for entertainment. You've turned character assassination into art. You want accountability. Take responsibility for the damage you do with your reckless accusations. I don't have to listen to this, Joy said, rising. Actually, you do, Robert said, stopping her. You started this fight. You brought me here under false pretenses. You attacked me without research, and spent 30 minutes trying to destroy my reputation. The least you can do is sit and hear the consequences. Joy sank back, looking smaller than ever. Robert adjusted his jacket. The most pathetic part, Joy, is that you could have done better. You could have asked thoughtful questions, engaged with the themes, had a real discussion about representation. Instead, you chose cheap shots, headlines, ego over conversation. I came here to discuss my work honestly. I was ready for tough questions and different perspectives. Instead, I found a host performing for the audience, not engaging with her guest. That's not journalism, Joy. That's not activism. That's cruelty disguised as righteousness. Joy's composure finally broke, her face showing defeat in front of millions. Robert stepped back, voice normal but firm. I think we're done. Joy, I hope you reflect on today, not for me, but for every guest who trusts they'll be treated with basic respect. He turned to the camera. To anyone who wants to form an informed opinion, see the film yourself and decide. Don't let anyone tell you what to think. Engage with it, think critically, and form your own opinion. With that, Robert walked off stage, leaving a stunned studio, a humiliated host, and one of the most talked about TV moments of the year. The cameras kept rolling as Joy sat in silence. The co-hosts exchanged horrified looks. The audience tried to process what they saw. If this story amazed you, subscribe and tell me in the comments which moment hit hardest.